My name is Megan Gill. I'm the director of the Independent and Assisted Living Village at McLean. And today I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what happens in the brain when someone develops dementia. I need to give full credit, and it's on the handouts that I'll have you take afterwards. It's not in the initial packet that you got, but this is all from the Alzheimer's Association. One of the best resources that you can use for to find out information about someone with Alzheimer's and or dementia is to go to alzheimers.com. They are a wonderful resource. They keep up to date on all of the latest information on medications, on new drug trials, and Susan's going to be talking a little bit later on. There's a new diet out there that's supposed to be able to help people with memory deficits. And whoever's got their phone on, if we could ask them to turn it off. There's music? Okay, there's music coming from someone. Okay, just didn't want to be distracting to other people. So, wanted to start with the brain. Many people know it became very popular with the Jerry Maguire movie, the little boy that says, you know, do you know that the human brain weighs 3 pounds? The typical human brain does weigh 3 pounds, okay? It is the most powerful organ in your body. It controls basically everything. The best way to describe, and I apologize, I didn't bring my #1 prop. Think of a head of cauliflower. That is what the texture of the brain surface looks like. So it's a good visual here. You've got the cerebrum, okay? That makes up the largest part of your brain, and that's where you're remembering, your problem solving, thinking, and feeling. It also controls your movement. So you'll notice with someone that has dementia, besides the typical things that you think of as far as the remembering or problem solving, they might also have difficulty. They might all of a sudden begin to lose their balance or have a different type of gait when they walk. It's because that's the main part of the brain that it's affecting. Cerebellum is the small part at the back, and it controls your coordination and balance. And then the brain stem sits beneath the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum, as you can see by the highlight, and it connects the brain to the spinal cord. And so those are those automatic. That's the brain stem is a really important part of your brain because it controls all those things, all those automatic functions, things that your brain doesn't have to process and quote unquote think about doing. It's just automatic. That's where it controls your breathing, all of your digestion, your heart rate, your blood pressure. So that's why people that have had brainstem accidents, you'll hear about them in car accidents. That's why the brainstem is so vital, because it's all the automatic things that you do. Okay. Okay, your brain is supplied by a series of blood vessels. Okay. With each heartbeat, the arteries carry about 20 to 25% of your blood to your brain. Okay, that blood is used to fuel your brain, to fuel the synapses, and to make your brain work properly. When you're thinking really hard, you actually need more blood and more oxygen. So you're going to have a greater flow when you're thinking very hard. So the blood's trying to get in there. It's just like when you're exercising, you're going to use your muscles harder. So the brain is like that as well. The entire area is just a system of veins and capillaries that all feed into the artery. So it's a little technical. Okay, the cortex. This is what we call it's the outer layer. It's the stuff that really looks like the top of a cauliflower. Okay. There are different areas of the cortex. This area controls sensations, sight, sounds, and smells. Other areas, this controls your thoughts, your problem solving. This forms and stores memories. So as you can anticipate, this is one area that is usually affected first with someone with a dementia or cognitive deficits, because that's where those memories are stored. and then a small sliver that controls your voluntary movement, your muscle coordination. Okay? Many people have said, I'm a left brain thinker, I'm a right brain thinker, I'm artistic, so I'm this or I'm that. So this is just a little brief definition. The left half controls your movement on the right side, and the right side controls your movement on the left side. Okay? And most people think that the language area is chiefly on the left. So as my family will tell me, I must be totally left-sided because all I do is talk. Don't have an artistic bone in my body, so I'm more of a left-side person. But just think it's the complete opposite. Right side controls the left side controls the right side. Okay? This is where we start to get into a little bit of the technical parts, but this is important because it can explain to you what is actually happening in a healthy brain versus what is happening in a brain as someone begins to develop cognitive deficits. Okay? The brain, all those blood cells, okay? There's also nerve cells in there, okay? And we don't have to get too technical about this, but these nerve cells, this is a healthy nerve cell. The best way to describe this is these are extension cords. The extension cords end and an electrical charge is sent to bridge the gap over to the next extension cord. Okay, so think of this as an electrical circuit. Okay, in order for your memory and for your brain to work properly, those synapses, those connections have to be healthy. When they start to fail is when you'll start to see memory deficits. Okay? The neurons are the chief type of cell destroyed when you're dealing with Alzheimer's. Many of you may already know that the only definitive way to diagnose Alzheimer's is with an autopsy. Okay? How people often ask, well, then why did my doctor say that my mom has Alzheimer's? There are common symptoms, there are common pathways that they can say this is more of an Alzheimer's type than another type of dementia. But the truly only definitive way is to look at the brain and to see, are the synapses broken down? Are the neurons broken down? And what part of the brain is affected? Okay? Any questions on that? All right. Once again, the best way to describe this is, once again, these are the electrical signals that are going through. So they have the electrical charges. Charge is going over here, and it's connecting with the next one. And they're called synapses. Okay? So in Alzheimer's, the electrical charges are not as strong, and they can't go from one cell to the other, or they go to one cell, and the cell that they're going to, they're jumping from here to here. This one's healthy, but the cell it's trying to jump to is not. Okay? All right. All right. This just shows, this is a PET scan. This is another way for for physicians to understand what's happening in the brain. They weren't as common about 10 years ago, but now you're hearing more and more people are going to have PET scans. And it's a scan of the brain. And on the left, as it says, shows a typical pattern of the brain activity. Okay? So this is typical activity of when you're reading, hearing words, thinking about words. Okay? All right, so I'm just looking at what it's showing. Okay. Activity is highest in the red areas. Okay, so here you are when you're reading. It's more towards the front of the brain. When you're listening, it goes more towards the center. Thinking about words, it's in this back area. If you remember one of the first slides, this is where the memory and thought process are, okay? And then your speech is in here. That's with the voluntary movement section of the brain. It was that thin slice. That's where your speaking is as well. Okay. Alzheimer's definitely changes the whole brain. Okay, this is a brain without disease, and this is where I like to usually bring in a head of cauliflower, because it's pretty graphic visual for you. Okay, so this is a healthy brain. Okay, very plump, no caverns in between. They're nice and thick little florets, if you want to say. This is a brain with advanced Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so not only has the plump healthy area shrunk, when you put the two over one another, the brain itself has shrunk. So this is the size of the healthy brain, and this is one with advanced Alzheimer's. Once again, a great visual. If you leave your cauliflower in the hydrator too long, it starts to shrink and shrivel up. That's what a brain with Alzheimer's looks like. Just picture, the cauliflower shrivels up because the fluid, the water in the cauliflower is all gone. It's starting to evaporate. That's what's happening. That's how it looks inside a brain. Okay. Once again, you can see where they get the cauliflower analogy. Okay. The cortex itself shrivels up, and it damages the thinking and the planning. The hippocampus, they start to not be as full. You end up with these holes, and that's where you form your memories. And then the ventricles get larger. These are just fluid-filled spaces. Okay? It's pretty graphic, and if you notice here as well, the healthy brain is up here. The one with advanced Alzheimer's has significantly shrunken in size. Okay. I'm going to go quickly through these. This is just another way of showing those synapses up close. And then they talk about plaques. Sometimes if you go to your doctor, they'll say, well, your loved one is showing plaques on the brain. Now, plaques are also shown for people with MS. MS, there can be some cognitive deficits with MS. There's what's called Parkinsonian dementia, and it's all based on how these plaques and synapses work. So they get really muddied, really clouded because they're not working properly. Okay, healthy, all clean, crisp, clean. These are starting to break down and die, so they're causing these like dust clouds that the brain has to work through. Okay, this just gets a little more into plaques. It's a little more scientific, but that's what's creating the dust clouds. So as they're damaging, they're breaking off. They're not going anywhere. They're just staying there and clouding the area. Tangles are another thing that they talk to. I do not think this is a good slide because most people can't see much of a difference between the healthy area and where tangles are forming. But what is one thing that you do notice between the two boxes? What color is more visible in the tangles are forming? White. White. So that's the spaces. That's the spaces. Okay? Okay. So this is the progression throughout the brain. Okay? 100%, there is no such thing as a complete roadmap to someone with Alzheimer's. Okay? As I said before, the true diagnosis is when someone has an autopsy. There are a lot of common similarities where doctors can rule out Parkinson's, rule out the other types of dementias that you might have, and say that it really looks like Alzheimer's, and they start treating it that way. But Alzheimer's in and of itself, I can't look at you and say, my mother was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and by this time next year, she will not be able to remember who I am. It might be 5 years. It might be 5 months before she forgets who I am. It depends on the rate of the progression within the brain. The average lifespan of someone with Alzheimer's is 8 years, but many people can survive up to 20 years. Now, what they also say is that it depends on when you're diagnosed. About 10 years ago, the Alzheimer's Association would say that a person with true Alzheimer's would be diagnosed in their 60s. That used to be the standard. Now they know that not to be true, because they say the older you get, the chances of it being senile dementia, many of you have heard that, or just old age, the older you get, the more chances are that's what it was. So they were saying that many people, they were finding that they were diagnosed in their 60s. I want to challenge you to think about people that you might know that are suffer from this disease. Usually, you can go back from diagnosis. You can usually go back 5 to 8 years and say, oh, that's what it was. I had a friend, one of my good friend's mother, her name's Gail, and we always called it pulling a Gail. You know, we joked with her about it. It's like, you're pulling a Gail, because she just seemed flighty. She unfortunately developed Alzheimer's. Looking back, she wasn't pulling a Gail. You could, if you looked back, hindsight is 20/20. If you looked back, you could see the slow progression of she was pulling more and more Gails as it was going along. So that's one of the frustrating parts, is we don't know. We can't say to someone, you know, here's what it's going to look like in 5 years. Here's what it's going to look in 6 years. You know, do this with your mom now because she won't remember you in 6 months. It depends on every single person. Okay? That's why it says right here, earliest Alzheimer's. Changes may begin up to 20 years or more before diagnosis. Okay? It's just a small area of the brain that's affected. Okay? I think it's scary because I could have it right now and not know. Okay? Mild to moderate generally lasts from 2 to 10 years. Okay? You can see, once again, this is where the problem solving and the memory and the thinking part of the brain, so that's where it's starting, and then it's spreading further. And then severe Alzheimer's, they say, can last 1 to 5 years. Many different ways of people stating the stages of dementia. There's hundreds of books on, well, I'm going to use the Megan Gill stage system, or I'm going to use this stage system. What they do, what's common in it is the stages are notoriously broken down to the person's abilities. So stage 1, right here, early onset, stage 1. These are people that are still working, still functioning just fine. 95% of them don't know that anything's wrong. Now, I don't want to scare people because everyone says, oh, I couldn't find my car keys. Does that mean I have it? No. It means you were thinking of something else. But so the early on stage, most people don't know or don't recognize any of the signs or symptoms of it. Mild to moderate is when a person who's been working or who's been able to function, you're noticing they are routinely forgetting things. They are routinely not able to follow through on something. They might have some word finding. They can still communicate, but they might have some, what was that word? Or, you know. Usually in the beginning of this mild stage, many of us start to use, and once again, I use it all the time now, calendars. Your brain still has the ability to say, I'm not going to remember that, so I'm going to write it down, okay? When you start to forget to even write it down, that's as you're progressing through. Most people in their mild stages are still living alone or living independently. Unfortunately, many of them are still driving, which is a danger. If you can't remember, or if you notice that a loved one can't remember how to get somewhere, really start to think about, looking at their driver's license. Driver's license are like people's left arms. I want people to drive as long as possible, but it really is a safety issue. I just counseled a family member about this, and they were saying, but mom only drives to church and back. Well, statistically, over 90% of the accidents happen within a 10-mile radius of your home. And it's really, getting lost is my greatest concern in the beginning, especially, for instance, in this weather. If they get lost and they can't find their way back in the car, you hope someone finds them so that they don't run out of gas, or God forbid, try to get out of the car and walk. So you need to think of that. And then the severe Alzheimer's, let me click on this, it'll light it up. That's when, as you can tell, more of the brain is involved. So you've gone from just the memory and the thought thinking, you've involved the speech and language, you've involved a little bit of the balance section. So that's when you start to see people maybe have difficulty walking, incontinence, because the brain isn't telling them, I need to go to the bathroom now. And that involuntary thing, part of the brain is saying, gotta go to the bathroom, going. But the in more severe, the brain isn't even recognizing, wait a minute, that's a signal, I need to take myself to the bathroom. Okay. Once again, I just kind of breezed through these just with all three of the slides. So this is the thinking, the learning, the memory. Okay. Then we go into the more of the speaking and understanding speech. You'll also find people walking into things. Their sense of where their body is. You might see someone start ending up with bruises on their legs or on their arms because they're just walking into things because they don't have a spatial relationship. That starts to go. Okay. And then the severe is where the brain shrinks dramatically and they lose their ability. They used to say that no one dies from Alzheimer's disease. People die from complications from Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. If someone gets to the very, very late stages, eventually the brain, that voluntary movement, the brain doesn't remember to breathe. Okay? So they die of asphyxiation. They don't die from Alzheimer's. So that can also confuse people too. But bottom line is the loved one had Alzheimer's and that's what caused the brain not to remember to breathe any longer. There are a lot of resources out there, as I said before. Please go on to alzheimers.org. The Alzheimer's Association of Connecticut has a hotline. You can ask any questions. They have tons of resources. And then why I'm standing here, McLean is a wonderful, valuable tool and resource for you. Should you have any questions, you do not have to have a loved one living at McLean to call one of us and ask us questions. We're your community resource. We want you to come and ask us the questions. At the end of the program, we'll introduce Gao, we have a memory care volunteer program that outreaches into the community. So we have a lot of resources available to you, and please don't ever hesitate to give us a call. I also need to plug that support groups. McLean has the first Monday of every month. We have a support group for spouses or family members dealing with a loved one with dementia. It is a wonderful support group. It practically runs itself. It's just nice to have someone else hear what you're going through. It's also wonderful of, I don't feel that I can leave my wife alone anymore. I don't feel like I can even go to the bathroom. I had a gentleman go, hey, this is what I did so that I could know that she's safe while I even go to the bathroom. We also have available to you information on there are specific support groups for children. That could be, unfortunately, that young person that's diagnosed. They've been as young as in their 30s with people that have developed Alzheimer's, as well as grandchildren. I don't understand what's happening to grandpa. The Alzheimer's Association, and we can get you that information for where those types of support groups are as well. There are many different types of dementias out there. Some of the ones that people have been hearing more and more about are Lewy body dementia. Lewy body dementia really, it takes away someone's filters. They not only in language choice, inappropriate language choice, inappropriate actions, they really don't have any sense of what's appropriate behavior and what's not appropriate behavior. It can be an extremely, extremely challenging condition to take care of. And what the Alzheimer's Association is working on is really focusing on getting people the support for those specific types of dementia because they are so different. Alzheimer's is a gradual progression, a gradual downward progression, okay? Lewy body, and I don't have my note, Lewy body, plateau, and then nosedive. There's no slow progression. And then I can't remember the other one. Vascular. Vascular will go here, dip, they plateau, and then another part. So those are the difference. But just because it's called the Alzheimer's Association doesn't mean that they can't give you help and support on those dementias as well. They will point you in the right direction if they don't have the resources themselves. Dementia's Kleenex. You know how Kleenex, everyone, tissues, facial tissues, but they're called Kleenex, but the umbrella analogy is phenomenal. Dementia is the umbrella. You can just have normal aging dementia. It doesn't have to be Alzheimer's, doesn't have to be vascular, doesn't have to be Parkinsonian. But so dementia's the catch-all. And then picture an umbrella with all different sections of colors. Every color is a different form of dementia. Yep. I'm going to have Liz come up and switch over so we can have Sue Safino.
I'm going to switch the presentation, and while I'm doing it, I'm just going to talk a little bit. My name is Liz Marquis, and along with Ellen Muser, we're a part of the marketing department at McLean, and we put on a lot of these educational presentations. Megan did introduce herself and mention Susan, but just to give you an overview of our roles at McLean, Megan is the director of assisted living, which includes our memory care assisted living, and Susan Safino is our registered nurse and nurse supervisor of assisted living, including our memory care assisted living community. So we do have the residential options for folks with dementia who may need a little additional support from the residential offering that McLean has. So you didn't do yourself justice in introducing yourselves. And one thing to think about as we're going through this, if you are working with someone or related to someone with dementias, is that we do have resources available. So it doesn't mean that someone has to move to McLean in order to take advantage. But what we're hoping today will show you is that we have the resources, but also give a little bit of education about what's happening inside the brain, and most importantly, how to benefit or how to enhance the experience for someone with dementia and to maintain a relationship with that person. So as they progress through the disease, they are feeling supported. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and Megan's going to be your technical person.
The one thing that I didn't do when I went away to college was take a tech course. So whenever I give a speech, I have to have somebody be my point person, okay? Communicating and connecting through communication. You can't have your hand there.
There you go.
Communicating with a person.
You stand over there.
She's always bossing me around. Communicating with a person with memory impairment, dementia requires patience, understanding, and good listening skills. What I'm going to ask also is that if anyone has a question anytime during this, just shout it out. Because the formality of answers and questions at the end necessarily aren't meeting your needs, and I want to be able to meet your needs.
We might not remember it.
There are two forms of communication: expressive communication and receptive communication. Expressive communication is the ability to communicate to others to express needs, wants, and thoughts through verbal and nonverbal communication. Very important. Emotions, smiling, frowning. But the one piece that I'd like you all to walk away from here is that smiling is one of the best forms of communication, whether it be with your coworker, your colleague, or your family member. Receptive communication that's the ability to process and to understand the message and therefore to react to it, such as returning what someone says and reacting to it. Would you go and empty the dishwasher? That means now. So therefore, you get up and you empty the dishwasher. Lengthy discussions, you don't have to put it on yet. Lengthy discussions are confusing. All they do is make the person think, what did they say? What am I supposed to do? Let me give you a little example of this. Mom, remember, I told you I was coming to pick you up, and I wanted you to wear that new dress. We were going to the mall, we're going to Metro Bis, and I really want you to start to think, don't you remember we talked about this yesterday? What was wrong with what I just did? Exactly. I gave her too many things in one point. What I needed to do is I needed to look.
And I wasn't even looking at her.
Yeah, you need to look at her level, except she's taller.
Yeah. Here.
You need to look at the person eye to eye at their level so that they can see, and they can see that smile and that sincerity in your look. It's always amazed me at some of our residents in our memory care area that when you just come down to their level to speak and look them eye to eye, how they brighten up. The same thing with if I'm talking to a colleague, I shouldn't be looking at their forehead or looking to the left or the right. I should be really paying attention to that individual, because that's where you want that receptive communication to go through. Thank you for very good.
You're welcome.
Yes. With progressing stages of dementia, the person's ability to communicate, which may lead to mood swings, depression, and isolation. So think if that was you, especially in the beginning stages of dementia. During the progression, your ability to communicate is decreased, your behavior changes to your communication, loved ones get frustrated, difficulty for family members to understand it all. Therefore, what do you think happens? There is conflict that's developed. The conflict between family members and loved ones, not wherever the stage of the dementia is. So it's difficult to family members to rationalize and to understand. So how are we going to enhance the communication? All right, repeat communication over and over again. Eliminate large rooms, too many people, TVs. A good example, my mother had dementia, and we treated ourselves more than we treated my mom. At Christmas time, we would bring her to the big old Irish family, and all the grandchildren would be running around. We'd be at a big, large table, and my mother would be at the head. And as the day progressed, you could just see her face. You could just see the confusion on her face. Who were we treating? Not my mother. We were treating ourselves because we were the good, dutiful children that was going to have our mother with us at Christmas. And I've seen it again and again. People trying to do what they think is right, not necessarily what is right for their loved one. The eye contact is so important. The calm voice, pointing or using family pictures or gestures. Always going back to that positive smile. Repeat the information or questions. Be aware of that nonverbal communication. Wait for a response or avoid criticizing or arguing. Do you know, it's interesting because especially when we get an expressive type of dementia that they cannot get back to you right away, and you're there and you're just watching and watching, you became impatient and you answer your own question. Well, that's really not appropriate. That's not fair to the loved one or the person you're speaking with. So always try and put yourself in their shoes, because their shoes are the place that we're trying to help. It's hard to accept the pertinent fact that your loved one can't understand the similar things that you've always said, or the similar endearing languages you've always used. It'll be easier if you can still accept the fact that this individual is still the loved one. They just have maybe some different ways of approaching things. You have to remember to focus on your loved one, because the loved one is always still your loved one. Next, please. long time ago I found this on the internet, and we kind of have decided that this is the creed that I want to live by, not only for McLean, but also for assisted living and memory care and what we can portray for the community. The McLean way, dignity is about enabling persons who are deeply forgetful to do things for themselves. My motto is Q, don't do. Sometimes all it takes is a little patience and a bit of guidance and understanding. Preserve someone's dignity and you preserve what makes them, them. Think about that. That's really, if you take away someone who already is having some identity issues and you take away more of their dignity, doesn't help them at all. It doesn't help them get up in the morning, smile in the mirror and say, maybe I'm a little more forgetful today, but I know tomorrow will be better. So just remember your basic communication skills, especially that smile. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.